And we're live. Welcome, fight fans, to another episode of Before the Bald Man Speaks, probably episode 19. I'm your host, as always, Andrew the Clown Kid Lawrence, coming at you live after the stunning upset of MMA history. There's no hyperbole that is too big for this main event in UFC 193 from Melbourne, Australia, with your new bantamweight women's champion of the world, Holm, upsetting the unbeatable, most dominant athlete in the history of sports, most dominant person ever to exist in the human form, Ronda Rousey. Helping me break down this insanity and keeping my excitement bottled down to a humane level is host of the Parting Shot podcast, Sportsnet writer, overall fantastic Canadian, James Lynch. James, how you doing, brother?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Andrew. Always appreciate it.
Oh, no, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on, and, we spoke very briefly before we went live here, but I'm really excited that we could have you on in such a crazy moment in the sport, and just such a night that could have really gone down in very forgettable fashion, but I guess it just wasn't fated for that. Give me your immediate reaction on this main event, and probably the upset of the year, definitely the upset of the year, if not the upset of the decade.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest upsets we've ever seen in MMA history. You just look at the fact that how Holm performed in her first UFC fights, and you kind of thought, the level of competition for her, maybe it's not there, and then she goes and does the unthinkable against Rousey and finishes her. I mean, that's one thing, people were thinking, hey, if Holm's going to win this, she might be able to point Ronda, kind of win on points and things like that. But a knockout, and the way she did it, just unbelievable, and that's why we love this sport so much, because it's so unpredictable. Anything can happen. Never can count anyone out of a fight at this point. And this has been a crazy year for upsets, too. If you look at Werdum over Velasquez, you look at Rafael Dos Anjos over Pettis, just add this to the list. And this is just a crazy sport. And my reaction still, I'm just very shocked. It's just unbelievable that we're talking about Holm now and not Ronda Rousey as the champion.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is one of those just dumbstruck moments in the sport, and probably this is really, if you really wanted to expose new people to the sport, this is a fantastic way to do it, because this isn't a sport like boxing, or I don't even want to make this stupid boxing comparison. It's just not a sport like many other sports, in that, the wild, unpredictable is kind of, you have to almost factor in that it's going to happen. The puncher's chance in MMA is realistic. And I'm not saying the puncher's chance is kind of what happened. It wasn't kind of Matt Serra GSP in this event. Holm clearly won it on skill and game plan, and really outfought and outclassed who we supposed was the greatest in the division. Just a fantastic night, I think, for this sport in general. The argument could be made that this is either good or this was bad for MMA. Which way do you interpret this?
I mean, I think it's good. I think it's the fact that we're going to see the comeback story from Ronda Rousey. I mean, hopefully. I mean, that's one of the things that a lot of people like talking about as far as a narrative goes. We got John Jones coming back next year. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things for 2016 that are already kind of in the works, and this is just part of it. And, it's really weird to look at this fight now because, obviously when someone loses, you really point out their flaws. And, thinking back to the Bethe Correia fight, Rousey did have her hands down, and now we're kind of really seeing the fact that, Ronda's boxing really not that good. And I sent a tweet out tonight, is Ronda going to fire Edmund? Because, I mean, the truth is her boxing looked atrocious tonight. And it's going to look like that against a former, professional boxer. But I really felt like Rousey was going to be able to grab her and throw her on the ground. That did not happen. Plan B was to try and stand and trade. Bad idea. That's Holm's bread and butter. Game, set, match. She gets the knockout win. And I'm very stunned. A lot of people are going to look at this and say it's bad for the sport because Rousey is the biggest star in MMA right now. But I think you can turn this around. You can look at this as, hey, you know what? We just saw the most dominant fighter in that division lose. You got to come check out the comeback story. If the UFC is able to spin this properly, this could work to their advantage. But Jonathan Snowden, got to give him credit for this. The UFC's done a terrible job of marketing their other bantamweight fighters. So don't be surprised if, they kind of screw this one up too.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how much you can really screw up this rematch. It's kind of one of these things that sells itself. I think there's enough star power and enough, public awareness outside of the MMA bubble that the rematch on this just is serious business. Let's talk about the Edmund Targaryen thing on this, and kind of, Ronda Rousey's evolution, so to speak, as a boxer. We heard a lot about it. We've, seen her hitting a lot of pads. We've heard all these stories about her knocking out, boxers who are coming to spar with her all the time. What do we think about that whole situation and everything that we've kind of heard and what's been told about her striking? Because in my opinion, I think the Bethe-Correia fight really put her self-impression of her skill set, way too high. And I genuinely thought at the beginning of the first round that she was going in there looking like she was wanting to strike with Holm, and that was her path to victory in her game plan for this fight.
Yeah, she did kind of what she normally does, and she's sort of the aggressor and really wants to dictate the pace. And when things weren't going her way, like she was hitting Holm wasn't going down. She was trying to clinch with Holm wasn't going down. I mean, she did get her down at one point, but there were no submission attempts there that really you thought, Holm's in trouble or anything along those lines. But you brought up a good point in the Bethe-Correia fight, because I almost think that was the worst case scenario for her heading into this fight. I can say this now because Rousey lost, but the fact that she knocked out Correia, I mean, she probably in her mind had this idea that she could stand and trade with anyone. And with a former professional boxer, she obviously paid the price for that, having her hands down, getting tagged repeatedly. And as far as Edmund goes, I mean, this guy can't even file his taxes properly. So, what are we to expect as far as his word on, how good Rousey's boxing is? I mean, it's not there. It just isn't. It didn't look very good compared to Holmes. That's something she's got to work out. And, I would hope she looks at other options for her stand-up training, because I just don't think she's getting the right training with Edmund Tarverdyan, because other than Rousey, who else has Edmund trained that's been successful? The answer, nobody.
Yeah. Edmund's problems with the IRS can be one of those things directly filed under like MMA BS. Just one of those hilarious stories that in one of these characters that you only really find inside of combat sports. But I'm not sure if Ronda Rousey's style, at least her stand-up, is ever going to be able to evolve to the level of like a Holm. I really think that the best part of her boxing game was always that it allowed her to close the distance and get the clinch, and that's where she's been most dominant. I don't think that she really needs all that much boxing to become the most dominant, athlete in the sport, or even to beat a Holm in a rematch. I think that her best bet is to just hone enough skills and hone the defensive striking enough so that she can get from that, kicking distance to that, boxing distance and break into the clinch. That's really where I think that she could evolve. Honestly, after watching this fight, I'm not sure if it really bodes well for Ronda Rousey in a rematch. I'm not sure if this fight doesn't play out the same way that it does every single, or 9 times out of 10. What do you think about Ronda's chances in a rematch?
After what I saw tonight, I don't think the rematch would go very well unless she's going to make some drastic changes. I mean, I agree with you. As far as what Rousey could learn, the biggest thing she could learn is striking defense. She got hit a lot in that fight, and that is something you can be taught. As far as output, I mean, that takes years of developing and things like that. So you're not going to be Holly Holm's level as far as the stand-up goes. But Rousey could figure out a better way to get the fight to the ground and use it to her advantage. I mean, here's the thing with Holly Holm, Andrew, that we don't know yet. How good is her ground game? She wasn't really tested tonight, and is it difficult to keep her down? We don't know. Rousey still, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy to take her down or easier to get her to the ground, but we still don't know with Holm what her ground game's like. I still tend to be of the belief that it's not very good, and if someone who's maybe got better striking defense and better wrestling could go in there and actually get her to the ground, maybe they could expose that facet of Holm's game. But clearly Rousey's not going to be turning into Mike Tyson overnight as far as her power and things like that. So the best bet for her is to try and hone her strengths even more and figure out better defensive skills. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah. Just listening to our conversation here, the more I'm convinced that this is probably a really good thing for the 135-pound division in a long-term sense. After this fight, we were really grasping at straws for contenders, and now all of a sudden I'm just thinking, how many great matchups do you have here? Whether even Rousey wins the rematch or we have Holly Holm winning the rematch. And we're taking the rematch for granted at this point. Ronda Rousey took a brutal KO, was completely knocked out cold and took 2 shots. two vicious hammer fists right after that. I'm not sure that I'll stick to this in days after it, but I'm thinking that this is the savior of the 135-pound division for the next 2-3 years, because I could imagine Ronda, leaving the sport in a year had this gone her way.
Absolutely, and it certainly changes the landscape, doesn't it? And now we've got options as far as contenders, like you mentioned. Let's also not forget that there was a talk this week about the UFC adding 125-pound division, so that opens some things up, whether there's fighters from 115 that want to go up, whether there's fighters from 135 moving down. So lots of options right now, and you got to love this if you're Miesha Tate at this point, because you know what? Miesha Tate, people don't seem to admit this, but Tate is a draw. Tate is someone that people know. They've seen her on The Ultimate Fighter. She is someone who has, made a career of herself, not only in Strikeforce, but also with the Rousey fights. She is someone now you could put against Holly Holm at this point. And you know what? I think she's in the best position. And if you're Cyborg, man, you got to be just like, damn it, I just lost out on this huge fight. There's so many things that this changes now. And you're right. It definitely makes things a lot more interesting.
Yeah, God damn it. Chris Cyborg just probably lost herself damn near $1 million tonight. So I guess, Holly Holm's game is Chris Cyborg's loss. That makes a very good point about Miesha Tate, because I could really see Ronda Rousey not wanting to take a fight for maybe 6 months, 9 months. I know that she deals with a lot of media pressure. She has a lot of obligations. She has a lot of opportunity outside of the cage. This might be one of those things where she really wants to rewind and take a whole step back and look at her fighting career and her skill set in general. And honestly, Holly Holm didn't take much damage. She could fight again in 90 days, and I wouldn't bat an eyelash at a booking like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem if Holm fought someone else next. Give Rousey some time off. Rousey should pull like a Jonathan Brookins and just go like off the grid.
Go to India.
Do something along those lines, because I think it might be the best bet for her. I mean, it was a brutal loss, and I think there's a lot of there were a lot of distractions going in this fight. I'm still a firm believer that the weigh-ins didn't play an effect in this.
No.
I'm still a firm believer that Travis Brown, all these other things that didn't. I don't think they played an effect. Rousey's mentally tough. I mean, I said this before the fight. She's been in the Olympics. She's fought in Brazil against Brazilian. She's very tough when it comes to the mental pressure. Her boxing just wasn't on point. I will live by that till the day I die. As far as why she lost this fight, it wasn't a mental thing. She came out a little bit too aggressive, but it was the boxing that lost her this fight, not the weigh-ins. Come on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. This is 100% a failure in game plan, and had nothing to do with any kind of outside pressures. As much as that'll be cited in kind of the MMA gossip, circles. God, is there anything else that we want to, say about it? I almost hesitate to move off of this fight, only because it's one of those landmark moments in the sport. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I hesitate to almost pass it by. How does this go down in history, I guess?
I think it is probably the biggest upset. From an odds perspective, I believe it is. At least in the UFC it is. I know Chris Cyborg, when she fought that last opponent in Invicta, I believe those odds were higher. But as far as the UFC goes, I believe this was the biggest upset. And it kind of felt that way. And I was, guilty as charged, felt that Holm was going to get submitted in the first round like a lot of other people. And, to me, it's one of the biggest, if not, Sarah, St. Pierre, those two are kind of the biggest that stand out to me.
Yeah, we could talk a little bit about the financial aspect of it. A lot of late money coming in on Holly Holm, and the Vegas books, or books in general, seem to have taken a very big hit. Especially with all this last-minute betting on Holly Holm. So, a lot of times that late steam, ends up going for nothing, and more often than not, it actually is just pipe dream, so to speak. But Vegas took a bat this week on the books. Did you put any money? But I know you like to bet a little bit. Yeah, I'm not the only one.
No. I did. I did the inside the distance with Rousey. I just, the price to me, I know it was a little high, but I still threw it in a parlay just for the hell of it, right? And so I did lose. The worst part about this is I was having a great night up until this point. Had Whitaker, had Rosholt. I mean, I was doing great. And then at the very last minute, I was like, you know what? I'll throw this a little bit on here. I mean, Rousey's going to win this fight. It's 5 rounds. Come on, something's going to happen. And yeah, I ended up down for the night. Just a lesson that I got to learn, which is you can't stack on a main event. which is something I did tonight. So that's unfortunate. But one more thing I want to mention here quickly is something that I think will go forward. You know, I had a lot of people tonight telling me that they picked Holm because they hate Rousey as a person. Rousey, you know, obviously with all her issues with, you know, Travis Brown and, you know, saying that she's against domestic violence and she's with someone who's obviously, you know, partaken in domestic violence, you know, all the things that people saying she's a hypocrite. A lot of people do not like Ronda Rousey. They hate her. They, you know, they equate her to being, you know, this horrible person. I don't necessarily agree with all that, but I think her stock could not be lower at this point. People wanted her to lose. I can't tell you how many people I saw on my Twitter timeline, Facebook, you name it, saying, good, glad she lost, I hate her, this and that. So it's going to be really tough, and it's going to be very interesting to see how she comes back from this, not just with the way she lost, but the fact that the public, for the most part, seems to have kind of turned on her, at least in this last couple months.
Yeah, you know, if there's one thing that that the public likes to do other than, like, rise someone up as a star, it's pull them right back down, kind of when they're at that apex. So, you know, we'll see if she goes through the whole cycle and gets her redemption. That would be, you know, a classic American, you know, tale if it happened. And I'm really interested to see what it is. Like I said, I think ultimately that this upset was fantastic for the division as a whole, fantastic for the sport as a whole. It was just, you know, there's just so much more possibility and so much more excitement that gets infused once a little, you know, proverbial crazy shit hits the fan. Let's talk about someone else whose star kind of fell, not nearly as dramatically, but Joanna Jędrzejczyk here, kind of in a spot where she was supposed to get the rub, supposed to have a showcase fight against Valerie Letourneau, who, while clearly lost, definitely availed herself pretty well. It was a close fight. You know, it was kind of almost reminiscent to me, not in the level of technical skill displayed, but in, like, the closeness of rounds to, you know, Jose Aldo against Chad Mendes, in that Chad showed himself to be, you know, very game in the fight, although clearly losing. I viewed Valerie in the same way. What do you think about Joanna Jędrzejczyk's stock after this fight?
Well, you know what? I actually thought that Val was going to have a good showing in here, and I should, you know, mention off the top, I am Canadian. You know, I do have, you know, a little bit of a homer bias here towards Val, but I did expect her to have a better showing, and, you know, I just kind of look at her resume as far as opponents fought. You know, Sarah Kaufman's the only person to officially finish her, you know, as far as her record goes. Roxanne Modafferi submitted her on The Ultimate Fighter, but of course those votes don't count. So I knew she'd be really game, and she's got really good stand-up, and I also feel like, you know, in the Moroz fight, she kind of turned a lot of heads with, you know, going out there and outstriking someone who's a very good striker. So as far as the fight goes, it didn't really surprise me that it went to a decision. I did think Joanna was going to get the finish at some point. I felt like she'd wear Val out, but Val was very tough, and I kind of equate that as well too. I think that the Mendes-Aldo fight, the second fight, was a very good kind of comparison to this one because, you know, Val kept coming forward. A lot of fighters could have switched up their game plan, tried to go to the ground, but Val stood there even though she's getting outstruck, and you know what? She showed that she does have some pretty good stand-up, and I saw so many people when this fight was announced saying that, you know, Joanna's going to smoke this girl in the first round. It's going to be even worse than Carla and Penne and this and that. She looked better than Carla and Penne. She didn't get finished. I mean, you got to give her credit for that. She was very tough. You know, I felt that it was a good performance on her end. I think she did the best she could. I mean, I don't think anyone was predicting Val to beat Joanna. But yeah, Joanna is human, and I think Claudia Gadelha will prove that in their rematch, hopefully, which is next. And you know what? Joanna's got amazing stand-up, and she proved that tonight. But guess what? She got taken down as well. She got hit as well. So those are some things she'll probably have to learn from this fight.
Yeah, I think the key phrase in what you said there was that, you know, Joanna's human, and that's kind of what Letourneau exposed. I think the rematch with Gadelha now has tons of intrigue. Anyone who doesn't think that was the best, you know, fight against Joanna that's been put on in the UFC is kidding themselves. Letourneau was winning exchanges just straight up, even in the final round of that fight. Now, granted, she lost the majority of exchanges and thus lost the round, but you still have to give her credit in that, you know, a lot of times Joanna went to engage, and the counterpunching of Letourneau, you know, stopped her in her tracks. A lot of times cold. A lot of times she stiffened up and had to, you know, take a couple step backs, you know, reset her stance, re-engage. Ultimately, her volume and just, I think, overall athletic skills, the fact that she doesn't have to cut as much weight, all played into a big cocktail that had Jędrzejczyk, you know, clearly ahead by the time we'd finished 5 rounds. Valerie Letourneau does cut a lot of weight. what do you see in her future? Does she stick around in the 115? Does she slide perfectly into that 125 division you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I think maybe 125 might be her next option. I've heard some rumblings too that this may be kind of the end of the road for her. I mean, she's been in the sport for a long time, since 2007. She's in her 30s now. Training an American Top Team. Where does she go from here? I think the fact that the UFC is putting that 125 division in there does give some hope for her as far as her continuing her career. But as far as 115 goes, yeah, I wonder is the weight cut really worth it? As far as her, competing down there, cutting the weight. I mean, she doesn't look good when she weighs in. A lot of people made a huge deal out of that, actually. Saying that she missed weight. She never missed weight. I believe she just, she was a pound over, I think, in her last fight, but everyone was all like, keep an eye on this. But no, I thought, tonight she proved that she can hang with the best person in the 115 division. What can she do at 125, which I think might be a better weight class for her? I'm very interested because her stand-up's still pretty good. I mean, if she can go toe-to-toe with arguably, the best pound-for-pound fighter at 115 and hang in there, I think that says a lot. And I think, the future looks good. And I would hope that Val doesn't decide to kind of call it quits, especially if that 125 division is happening.
Yeah, definitely. I think just the newness of a division and having put on such a good title fight, gives her a little bit of name recognition should that division pull itself together. I'll move on to Mark Hunt and Bigfoot Silva, but goddamn Ronda Rousey got upset tonight in the main event, and I'm still reeling from it a little bit. It's just, this sport has always kind of had a habit of king worship and kind of like idolization, and as such a young sport and kind of, and realistically, it's a very fringe sport. We want and savor the approval of this mass audience, and we finally had. Our ambassador, our Trojan horse, to kind of get us into, mainstream consciousness. And even though I said that this is ultimately great for the status of the division, I wonder how just absolutely killed we are as a sport a little bit after tonight. Will we ever get the Esquire dollar back, James Lynch?
Yeah.
Will we ever get that 17-year-old dollar back, man?
Well, I was just thinking, what happens if Aldo KOs McGregor? I mean, think about that. How insane would this be if that ended up happening? I mean, that's kind of the equivalent of this, isn't it, right? Like, I mean, Rousey and McGregor are the two biggest stars. How do you react as an organization after this? It's insane. So, again, the possibilities are endless. But, yeah, as far as Rousey goes, I mean, I think this is just one of those things where, maybe she takes some time off, reevaluates things, and kind of goes from there. But this was a devastating loss. It's not like she lost a close split decision or maybe she was just like a fluke thing. Like, she was dominated from the opening bell. It shades of Dillashaw Barao, except, just the finish came earlier.
And maybe a more devastating finish. Yeah. I mean, she was knocked unconscious in those two hammer fists. That was Forrest Griffin, Shogun, Hua level hammer fists. Oh, yeah. Like, bouncing a head off the mat. Good Lord. But what a financial, 180 that this organization would take.
His erection. It's done. It's flaccid.
It's done. Yeah, like the UFC coming off a banner year financially, finally figuring out, two star powers. If Jose knocks out Conor, they lose their two biggest money makers in the same time. That would be some serious. I guess irony.
And how do you market Holly Holm if you're the UFC now? I mean, she's likable.
Nice.
She's nice, but is she going to be going on Ellen now and telling her story? I mean, it's.
I don't know.
I don't know how they're going to be able to market that. I mean, other than the fact she looks like Amy Schumer's sister, I mean, you're not really going to get any star power as far as trying to market that. So it'll be interesting because the UFC struggled with marketing fighters that aren't exactly exuding personality. Look at Demetrius Johnson. I mean, that guy is a phenomenal fighter, but they have failed to market this guy properly. And I know some fighters, it's on them at a certain point to market themselves, but is Holm going to take advantage of that? Who knows? It's very difficult. And again, this is, forget about Rousey making her comeback. The UFC's got to figure out how they're going to spin this for Holm and try and make her someone that people are really going to get on board with. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I really don't see the UFC doing that just because I think that, the UFC is very comfortable in the model of people that they know how to push. They're used to pushing brash people that, relate to, the idea of rebellious youth and just like badass swaggery. not so much good at pushing a down home, the preacher's daughter, a down home Christian girl like Holly Holm. Yeah, good luck getting someone like that on Ellen. But I have a feeling in a couple months we'll see, Ronda doing her rounds, with, maybe with a bit of humility on the back of it. I think that she's an interesting enough character and interesting enough person that, America will still be curious, to see how contrite she is, or contrite's not the right word, but you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. How they'll receive her at this point. I mean, here's the thing with Rousey, and I've said this a million times. I mean, she is like an honorary Diaz brother. I mean, she's not, she doesn't come across very intelligent. People seem to love Nick Diaz, but really they do a lot of the same things. I mean, they're not very good with the media. They're not, very, very friendly, and, they both have exciting styles. But for Ronda, I think because she's a female, I think that it's just that much more pressure for her to try and live up to this role model, or I hate using that word. We discussed this on Twitter the other day, but it's it's one of those things, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the UFC does with Rousey as well, just to how they're going to kind of mold this going forward.
Yeah, Ronda Rousey is my favorite role model, and you knew you were going to slip that in, and it aggravates me.
The Pandora's box.
Do you know who my favorite role model in this fight actually is, and we're about to talk about his fight, is Mark Hunt. Yes. If anyone's going to be my role model, it's going to be Mark Hunt. I want to become, severely overweight and still be the toughest motherfucker in the history of caged fighting. Mark Hunt, kind of in... as if it was preordained as soon as the bell rang, stalked down Antonio Bigfoot Silva, and just, first time we really genuinely connected, it was lights out for Silva. What do you think about the future of Bigfoot? I know we kind of always do this, but you're talking about a guy who's being severely KO'd in a lot of his last bouts. Kind of squeaked away with the victory there against the Hulk Palele. But other than that, it looks like it's time to hang him up for Bigfoot.
I agree. Just taking way too much punishment. You talk about the two Kane fights he lost, getting knocked out by Cormier, getting knocked out by Hunt now, Arlovsky, and Mir. I mean, those are, and the thing I've kind of pointed out here is that, Mir, Arlovsky, all these guys are not really known for their knockouts. I know Mir is, coming off, he does have the win over, Todd Duffy, but in general, they're not guys that you really expect to get a first-round knockout. And the thing is, it's just one of those things where, I said this tonight, Silva is one of these guys that, coming off TRT, has looked drastically worse. And, Soa almost finished him in their last fight. I mean, people forget that first round. Soa was on top. It looked like he was gonna finish it. And, fighting Mark Hunt, I've seen some people say, this is going to be like their first fight. It is not going to be like their first fight. You want to know why? Because Antonio Silva is a liability out there when it comes to facing anyone with any sort of punching power. And Mark Hunt has that punching power. It was a simple formula for me. Hunt goes out there, gets the finish. I'm actually surprised the line wasn't even higher because, Hunt is tailor-made to knock out a guy like this. I think someone like Roy Nelson would probably still knock out Antonio Bigfoot Silva.
Yeah.
Same sort of power punching. And the problem here too, Andrew, is like we don't really know where Hunt is either because, yeah, he knocked out Bigfoot Silva. How's he going to do against anyone else? He had to have taken too much punishment after the Werdum fight, after the Stipe fight especially. So really, I mean, we don't know where he is even at this point. But Silva, yeah, time to hang him up. And I know there's another fight we're going to talk on here too, and there's a guy in that fight I think should hang him up as well, and I'll mention that when we get to that.
Yeah, I think we both are on the same page on who that is too. Mark Hunt, this is probably the best thing for him because he's not going to fight for another 6 months and gets all that extra kind of recovery time, in my opinion, from a pretty bad beating that he got put on him by Stipe, and he still, when he took that beating, was reeling from 2 fights before that. The JDS beatdown. So he's taken a lot of damage at a couple big spots, but managed to, stick around in his career, based on the power of his punches more often than not. I thought that Mark Hunt looked good, physically. Everything they said about him getting skinnier, that was all very positive. I think the move to AKA Thailand, which, by the way, does not make sense as a name for a team, but AKA Thailand. Yeah. I think that these are positive things. He needs like a legit head coach that's going to push him, physically. And these are things, if you're going to be a 41, 42-year-old fighter, whatever Mark Hunt is, that you need to start doing, or you're going to have that drop off even quicker than it already is.
Yeah, and then realistically, how many more fights does Mark Hunt have left? He's in his late 30s. I mean, maybe one, maybe two. I mean, he's coming off the win here, but what do you do with him at this point? I mean, what fun fights are there for him? He's fought kind of the top guys already. Are you going to give him a guy like Mitrione or Derek Lewis? I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, do they go that route? I'm not sure. But, I mean, it's good that Hunt won. But really, I mean, this is as good as it's going to get for him from this point, because he can't compete with the elite anymore, unfortunately. He's just too high up there in age and taking too much punishment.
Yeah, I mean, we could do I don't know if it's even been done, but Mark Hunt, Josh Barnett.
Yeah.
Something like this, the old school names, they stick around. I see two more, fights in Mark Hunt's future, and hopefully, we see him ride off into the sunset, because he strikes me as a dude, despite all the damage and punishment, he seems like a guy just built for the sport. A guy who will walk away from this with no brain damage, laugh it off, have another 14 kids, and and live his happy days in Australia or somewhere. Yeah. Let's talk about. Do we really have to? The other two cards on the main. There's so much excitement in this card in certain spots, and then there's
some, go down from here.
There's some spots that just weren't that great. We can talk a little bit about Uriah Hall, about versus Robert Whitaker. Whitaker, looked really good, but I thought that this story is really about the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde nature of Uriah Hall. A guy who, if he can't land his flashy stuff from a distance, just seems like he is lost in a fight and kind of quits on himself almost a little bit, even though that's a little strong of a word, and I don't like to talk usually in terms of a fighter quitting, because they're such mentally tough people. But, when he can't land, these great athletic moves and just be a clearly dominant speed athlete, it seems to always go south for him.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I mean, you look at his fight with John Howard, a fight that he lost, fight with Natal, same sort of thing. I mean, those fights were really boring, and you could see Hall being very tentative. I kind of disagree with your assessment there in the sense that, Whitaker is just a better striker than he is. He is a guy that brings it to Hall. When Hall is off his plate, as far as his opponent coming forward and being more aggressive, Hall cannot react properly. I think Hall was landing strikes. The problem is you're going toe-to-toe with the guy who's a better striker than you and has more power, and that's what Whitaker did. He showed tonight that, again, he's one of the best strikers in that division. Dare I say, and I tweeted this night, I think he's the dark horse at 185 at this point. I mean, he's a guy who's moved up to 85, looked great. Getting a win over Hall is good. I mean, even though it was a decision, I think he's a guy that still packs a punch. And, how's he going to do against some of the upper echelon guys? We'll see. I'm very curious to see where he goes from here. But a big win for him. And as far as Hall goes, I just don't think he's ever going to be this Anderson Silva-like guy that Dana built him as tough. He's just not there. And it's, it's okay. But it's just too much emphasis was put on him on tough. And I just think we're not going to expect him to be this. He showed it in the Musashi fight, but I think Musashi fights him again. Musashi probably wins. I think it's just one of those things where Hall, he can't compete with the better strikers in that division. And that it showed tonight. Yeah,
the mental aspect of the sport is just so massive. I think you can clearly see in Uriah Hall a dude who has that elite athleticism, has the tools, has the technique, but it's not just the ability and the will to enact those techniques, but also the showmanship and the confidence to kind of hit them. In the big lights, in the big stage, after doing all the interviews, against someone who is, just as good as you in multiple aspects of this game. And that's really, an unfortunate reality of the sport. Uriah Hall, he'll wipe the floor with so many middleweights in the UFC, but just, these rugged, really talented, fast hands, just with basic skill sets, not doing anything flashy, but doing the basics with, with proper technique and being accurate with your punches and, stiffening you up while you're going for Taekwondo, spinning kicks. Taking top position when you fall on the ground because you went for some obnoxious shit. This is the kind of stuff that ends up, putting the difference between, winners and losers sometimes in the sport. And unfortunately, Uriah Hall hasn't been able to figure that part out. And I don't really see him ever, putting it together at this point.
No, and I think he'll just kind of be that gatekeeper, so to speak, in that division. Can beat, some of the lower tier guys, but, as far as the guys above him, like Whitaker's now in that category, he won't beat, like he wouldn't beat, like I don't even think he'd beat a Machida, to be honest, at this point. No. I think Machida would just, there's, I mean, it's tough to say. Machida's taken some damage here and there, but, it'd be a fun fight, but, I think Machida just has more tools. The thing is, it's guys that are more aggressive than he is. That is something he has to identify, and he's got to go for broke. I mean, when you're losing this fight in the third, you got to come out there and really go for it, and we didn't really see that. So that part of it, I will agree with you as far as him not pulling the trigger. But, Uriah Hall, just again, another disappointing fight. And Whitaker, props to him, man. Big surprise at 85, and I think it's great, especially for that market because, how many Australians you really look at and say, oh, next big thing. Whitaker is, still a young guy. I think he's only 24, so lots of potential for him as far as him going forward.
Yeah, fantastic. You could imagine in 2 years, 3 years, him maybe even being a contender. You look at a guy like Chris Weidman who, while very dominant right now, and guys like Luke Rockhold, they're kind of that, half a generation above him and might fade out of the sport, might slow down and lose a step. Opening up the main card tonight was just really an awful fight. I'll just go out and say it, between Jared Rosholt and who did he play? Oh, yeah, Stefan Struve. Seriously, I had to check my notes after everything that happened. Like, I genuinely had to look at who Jared Rosholt beat tonight. I really don't want to see, Stefan Struve. It sucks to say about like a 27-year-old guy in this sport, but I'm not all that interested in seeing him fight anymore. I think he's clearly lost something in his overall game. Maybe it's the damage. There's a lot of mileage on him despite, his young age. And Jared Rosholt was just unimpressive with this. Clearly won the first 2 rounds with this takedown and kind of, holding it down, minimal ground and pound, and then just knew it in the third round and totally took his foot off the gas pedal. Do you have anything to, put in for this unimpressive performances?
Yeah, I mean, this didn't surprise me at all. I saw a lot of people picking Struve, saying Struve knockout, Struve submission. I just didn't see it. I was not impressed with Struve in his last fight against Big Nog. Just wasn't impressed at all. Ever since his heart issues, and even before that, one thing I really talked about tonight was his fight IQ. I mean, go watch his fight with Mark Hunt. There's a clear path to victory when he fought Mark Hunt, and that is get him to the ground and submit him. Mark Hunt's ground game is awful. I mean, a lot of people just don't take advantage of it. And he had him on the ground a couple times, and he could not capitalize. And as soon as the fight got back to the feet, Hunt won the fight. And a lot of people forget in that fight, Struve was the favorite. I mean, he was coming off the win over Stipe. He had a lot. His stock was pretty high, and people thought this was a future champion. And Hunt went out there and knocked him out, and that was just the continuation of his run as far as going on his streak as far as Mark Hunt goes. So there's that, and then there's also the fact that who could Struve beat at this point? I really don't know. I mean, honestly, you can't beat Jared Rosholt. You have this huge height and reach advantage. It's kind of like watching Kendall Grove in a way, and I'll kind of equate this in a way. Let me point this out here. Okay.
It's so true. I have to react, though. It hurts to say, but it's true.
Kendall Grove has a perfect build for the 185 division. He's tall, he's lanky, he's got a really good reach, and Struve is kind of the same way. The problem with both those guys, though, is they don't know how to utilize it. If I'm Struve, I'm hitting that jab all night, and he didn't do that. There was points in the fight where he was winning the stand-up. Keep the fight on the feet. Learn takedown defense. I would have brought in whatever wrestler, high-level wrestler to the Black Zillions, try and train that day in, day out, learn how to stop takedown defense. Granted, he's going up against a guy who's an NCAA Division I wrestler. I mean, it's very tough. Rosholt's done this to plenty of opponents. So, what are you going to do? But I was not surprised by this. Rosholt does not have exciting fights. He wrestles people. He's like the John Fitch of the heavyweight division at this point. And you know what? Do you ever hear anyone say, oh, that was a great Jared Rosholt fight? No, you don't. But this was going to happen because Struve did not have the right game plan to go in there and counter Rosholt. And we wouldn't even be talking about this if Struve had knocked out Rosholt. But guess what? Couldn't use his jab, couldn't use his reach, and this is the result we get.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the story for quite a while, and the frustrating part about Stefan Struve is that for such a tall guy, he can't fight tall. And really, without that attribute, he's kind of a walking target for anyone who wants to wrestle in the heavyweight division. And unfortunately, there happens to be some very good wrestlers in the 265-pound division in the UFC. UFC, or rather the Fox Sports 1 prelims here, we had 3 fantastic knockout finishes in a row. We had Jake Matthews' TKO finish in between the second and third round. We had a first-round KO finish by Kyle Noak, and we had John Volante's kind of sad and depressing KO victory over the Hippo Anthony Perosh. Take your pick out of those three. What was your favorite KO there?
It's got to be Kyle Noak. I mean, how surprising was that he finished Sabata in the first round with a kick, basically, and then he just kind of finished him after that. No one really expected that. I didn't really see anyone, of note really picking Kyle Noak. This seemed like Sabata's fight to lose as far as him going in there and getting a submission finish. That didn't happen. I think the thing for me that really stood out was the fact that he, the noise that he made. I mean, I haven't heard a scream like that since Aoki almost broke Eddie Alvarez's ankle in Dream. You remember that? And, it was just, or Joe Warren probably is a more recent example against Galvao, screaming out.
Getting the Dream reference. But, I bring James Lynch on for the Dream references, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I got to bring something else to the table, am I right? So no, the scream will always be something of note. And actually, now that I think of it, Jordan Mean, when he got hit by Thiago Alves, kind of a similar thing where he kind of just cringed. And yeah, for Sabata, he got hit pretty hard, and Noak took advantage, and he got the win. So good for Noak, because I'll tell you, if Noak would have lost this fight, it was probably the end for him. He lost a couple fights there. So that for me was impressive. But I do have to talk about Jake Matthews. Man,
yeah.
Minus 1,000 heading into this fight. Huge favorite, and was almost finished in the first round. Oh, man, this guy has got to learn. This guy, first off, has got to stop training with his dad. He's got to go to a decent camp and actually learn some skills because, just the striking defense was horrible. Did not look good in that first round. I'd be very hesitant to even pick Jake Matthews going forward after this. But, he does get it done. It's just, Areola kind of fading. And Matthews took advantage, and so he gets the win. So there you go. And Vellante, big deal, beat up a 43-year-old.
Yeah. I'll save my comment on the Hippo. I'll talk briefly about Akbar Areola. If I mispronounce his name, Jesus Christ, cut me some slack, people. He's just really one of the least athletic 155 pounders that you could find. So for Jake Matthews to go out and have that kind of first round with the amount of hype behind this kid really shows the ceiling we got going on here. Fade this, prospect against any legit contender and make yourself some money. I knew that this wasn't the opponent to do it, but I was almost wrong. And we were a couple seconds away there from seeing the demise of, Australia's favorite, young fighter. Don't really see what the hype is going on there. Definitely a guy who needs to take his talents elsewhere and expand his game. Should take a good little break from fighting. He's a young guy. He can take, some time off and hone his skills a little bit. Essentially, he recovered from being knocked out this fight, and he'll walk away with the victory, not the kind of shame of a defeat or the setback in his career that KO defeat would have been for him at this big stage. So he's very lucky. Reassess. He's still super young, so he could add to his game in leaps and bounds. I'll kind of wait and see on him there. Kyle Noak saved his career tonight, and that's that. Super impressive. I think it was kind of one of those freak KOs. I really didn't see that fight going well for him in a lot of ways, and I don't really see where he goes from here. It would be a fantastic opportunity for a guy like him to ride out into the sunset, but this is MMA, not a fucking Western, so we won't see that. We'll see one more horrifying knockout for Kyle Noak before he hangs him up. And then poor Anthony Hippo Perosh, who I don't know why I like Anthony Perosh, but there's something about his overall aura. Maybe he just seems like a cool guy to have a beer with and hang out with. He'd be the coolest jiu-jitsu instructor in the world. Maybe that's why I like him. But God, I don't want to see him fight again. Watching him get knocked out from me tonight really, really made me sad. And I wasn't even all that impressed with John Vellante. It almost seemed like John Vellante was sad after his finish.
Yeah, no, he wasn't impressed with his own performance, but again, I can see why. It's not like he beat anyone that was, worth noting. I think the worst thing that ever happened to Anthony Perosh's career is when he knocked out Vinny Magalish, because after that, people thought there was still some life left, and then of course he gets he lost the decision to Bader. It just kind of surprised some people. A lot of people were picking Bader to win that fight in the first round. That didn't happen, and then he gets the submission win over Gudo Innocente again, and since then it's just been knockout city. Since then, O'Connell knocked him out, now Vellante. So, it was kind of, this should have happened years ago as far as, Perosh, never thought, that Anthony Perosh, there's a title challenge.
Yeah.
I mean,
just kind of a fun guy to have around, you know?
It was a nice run, but it's come to an end, and yeah, you should hang him up. 43 years old, got nothing left to prove.
Yeah, nothing left to prove, man. I'm gonna go ahead and give a big salute and a big tip of the cap to Anthony the Hippo Prosh, one of the baddest nicknames in the goddamn sport, too, and just a tough bastard. You know, God, I still remember that Ryan Bader fight where he really put a beating on him for 3 rounds. That was probably a good sign. He should have hung it up back then. But I'm glad you got a couple more paydays, Anthony. Take it off, man. You got jiu-jitsu seminars to teach for the rest of your goddamn life, man. You can make $100 to $1,000 every weekend somewhere in Australia. We had 3 decision victories after that, and we'll do the same thing. We had Danny Martinez taking a unanimous decision over Richie Vass, which is apparently a way that you can pronounce this guy's last name, so I'll go with that. Daniel Kelly with a unanimous decision over Steve Montgomery in his fantastic French braid, and Richard Walsh taking one over the walking corpse of Stephen Kennedy. What was the best performance out of those 3 for you?
I like the Moonwalkers finish there. Although again, same sort of thing. Kind of didn't look great from the outset. But no, I got to start on the first fight of the night. How do you pronounce it? Is Ben Nui? I saw some people pronounce it. It's like Wee or Nui or something like that. Anyways,
yeah, Norwegian.
Yeah, but they pronounce it like Nui or something. I'm totally butchering this. I'm going to get flamed on Twitter big time for this. But whatever.
Fuck the Twitter haters. We can pronounce it any way we want. Fuck you all on Twitter. We invent pronunciation.
But anyways, he submitted Ryan Benoit, I should say, and it gets the job done. And I thought he looked great. I mean, that was a great way to start off the card. And a guy that I'd like to see fight a top 15 guy, going forward. I think there's some potential here with him. And
real quick, speaking about pronunciation,
yeah.
Ryan Benoit, right?
Yeah, Benoit. Yeah. We
could totally give him Ryan Benoit. I don't care if you want the French pronunciation, bro. You're gonna get it.
Yeah.
You want the Ryan Benoit. I know you're dumbass American and you think you want Benoit, but you want to be called Ryan Benoit.
Yeah, Benoit is would be the French Canadian.
That's the right way to say it.
Yeah, Ryan Benoit.
Yeah,
sounds more sophisticated.
Yeah, right. If you're gonna go and introduce yourself to some ladies, you want to be Ryan Benoit and definitely not Ryan Benoit.
I'm Mr. Benoit. Just doesn't have the same appeal. You're right.
No, there's no savoir-faire there. There's no joie de vivre. God. Ben 10, though, did have a fantastic start to the night. And in the 125-pound division, and we don't see a lot of, fast finishes, almost had that KO. I was super impressed. You were talking about it when I cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, it was just it was a nice finish. And again, I think it's good that, good old Ben here is, got some potential here. And I think that's what's important here. As far as Fight Pass fights go, I think that's what they should be showcasing is kind of the younger guys, give them that next step, give them some incentive as well, too. You're going to be on Fight Pass. It's worldwide. Not a lot of people tune into it, but it's one of those things where it gives you that good kind of platform to prove that you do belong on the Fox Sport prelims, and I think it's a good step for him as far as the direction he wants to go in his career, and I think it's good. This is the type of stuff we got to see.
That's the type of performance you put in on Fight Pass to get yourself on that FS1, on the replay that got seen by, close to 1 million people. You get a little bit of name recognition. You get a little bit of, rub. You do another one of those in a Fight Pass prelims in a big card like this. God damn it if you don't get a little name, even if it's amongst the hardcores. I know for sure I won't forget who he is next time. And there's a lot of Fight Pass people. When I read those names, I go, let me go check the notes. I'm not quite sure who the hell this guy is. Yeah. A good on Ben 10. I thought that was, right in there for a performance of the night. If we hadn't had, the Hunt finish and the Holm finish to kind of steal all that sunshine. Mutassi with a fantastic KO himself. We had spinning shit on spinning shit, which just, makes me happy in all the best possible ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see him bounce back from that loss to Kevin Lee. Obviously, Mutassi, has some potential here. Still a relatively young guy. It's nice to see these types of finishes. Zafir, I know there was a little bit of hype because I think he had a bit of a winning streak coming into his UFC debut, but can't compete with the guy with the Moonwalker, man. You can't compete with that.
Yeah, fantastic name. fantastic style. You hope he can stand up to some of those, wrestlers over there in the welterweight division. You're definitely going to need to shore up that takedown defense so you can continue to perform all this kind of fancy shit. But, young in your career, build the highlight reel, get yourself, set up for a bigger fight. Hopefully you're ready for the spot. I think that Muntasiri could surprise a lot of people and do some things because I don't think he's lacking in the athletic department. And, the stand-up and the use of space was really there. The IQ is pretty high.
Yeah, and also we should mention, his last fight was at lightweight. This is at welterweight. Maybe a better division for him as far as him progressing in his career. And I think he looked a lot better tonight than we saw him in the Kevin Lee fight. And that's not taking anything away from Lee because Lee's a stud, but Muntasiri looked great.
Yeah, continuing this kind of storyline of with no IV, a lot of people taking that bump up and dampening their harsh weight cuts. Real quick, Dan Kelly beat Steve Montgomery, a loss for guys with really cool braids in their hair everywhere. Props to Kelly and a round of applause. We don't see much more from him. Anything else? You want to give Dan Kelly some props?
Not much. I mean, good for him. It's great that he gets the win again. He obviously was coming off that TKO loss to Sam Alvey, if you remember. 38 years old, not much more to say. I guess he'll probably be on another Australia card if they ever have one next year, or maybe he calls it quits. But 38 years old, not many fight years left for him. And Steve Montgomery probably getting his walking papers, probably going back to Titan FC. Just one of those things. I did think he did look better at the higher weight class tonight, up at middleweight. I believe his last fight was at welterweight. So it's not. There were some questions as far as his chin and things like that. I think he kind of proved those critics wrong tonight. And, there were points where he was winning this fight. He just couldn't get it done. His cardio kind of faded as the fight went on, and Kelly took advantage.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just don't think, Steve Montgomery's UFC caliber.
No.
And, it's not the biggest insult in the world. There's just, a lot of people in that weight class. It's tough to be an elite level athlete in any sport. So, it's not too much of a personal insult, but, he's a good fighter. He's just not a great UFC fighter. Kind of fantastic nickname, fantastic look.
Only
and a guy you want to root for. Definitely, you see a young guy, clearly a scrapper, clearly a tough kid. But, the realities of this sport are very harsh. And I think, they caught up with Steve Montgomery tonight. Danny Martinez, took away one from a hometown guy here in a unanimous decision victory in probably the most boring fight of the entire card, if not my entire life. I grade every single card, and you're Canadian, so I don't know if you guys use A to F in your schools.
Yeah,
do you guys use numbers?
We do. Yeah, we do.
I always say this to Canadians, and they look at me like, "Are you fucking stupid?"
Keep
doing it.
I can't remember. Like, I know in Canada that is a D where you guys are from considered a fail because it is in Canada?
No, yeah, an F is a fail.
Yeah, well, a D is also a fail here. So if you get below that, like a D is considered, I think 40 to 49%, and then 50% is a pass. So D would actually be considered a fail as well. Like an F in Canada means you really suck, and a D is like you failed. So it's a little bit different. So there are some differences between. In
America, if you're 60 or below, that's an F. You're fucked.
Okay.
You get 60%. That's not good enough to cut it here.
60 passes here.
Yeah. I think you need that. Maybe I'm fucking this up, but maybe it is like 60%'s the D and then 59%'s the F. But anyway, I never give out Fs for a fight because I always want to give two human beings props for going into a cage and throwing leather at each other, especially in the UFC. But I gave this one an F because, god damn it, if I didn't want to play video games or goof around on Twitter while this was happening.
Yeah, it was definitely forgettable. Vasulik had his moments, just couldn't get it done. Martinez obviously coming out with a better game plan here. Doesn't really bode well for either guys going forward. You'd never want to see a fight go down like this. Just very uneventful, not a lot of action. Nothing more really to say other than, really kind of a stalled evening after a couple of those finishes.
Yeah, definitely. Let's kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about the card as a whole. Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask your opinion on the fight of the night and the two performances of the night. So be Dana White, be the money bags of the UFC. Tell us who gets the bonuses.
Fight of the night for me would be Whitaker and Hall. I thought they delivered. Performance of the night has got to go to Holm. Obviously, can't take that away from her. I mean, that was an unbelievable performance. I wonder if people will say fight of the night was Holm just because she dominated. I don't like that. For me, fight of the night has got to be where two guys kind of, both kind of go at it. Rousey didn't really give too much output, so I kind of, a domination fight for me isn't a fight of the night in my opinion. And what's the other one? Am I missing one here? Is there?
Yeah, no, just another performance of the night.
Another performance of the night. Mark Hunt knocked out Bigfoot. Good for him.
Yeah, we're 100% in line here. I think Mark Hunt and Holly are the clear winners. The only other candidates that are I'd like to see the guys who don't get paid any money getting some of these goddamn bonuses. If we're going to be real about it, Mark Hunt's making that walk, and he's probably clearing a cool $300K, if not plus, with some locker room bonuses. Love to see 50 G's in the pocket of Ben Nguyen, or however the internet wants to decide that name's pronounced. Muntasiri, I also wouldn't be too upset to see 50 G's fall in that kid's pocket. I'd love to see the UFC shift away from giving these fight of the night bonuses to start giving them to some of these undercard guys. Just because I know the money means so much more to them.
Yeah, completely agree. And yeah, I would have no arguments with that at all. If you wanted to give it to Ben or to Muntasiri, I'm down. I mean, give these guys something. I mean, they're, we hear stories of guys traveling to Australia and losing money. We don't want to hear that.
Yeah, that's kind of the, one of the unspoken tragedies. So I guess more and more is spoken about kind of inside the bubble. Just how little support money is given out to kind of these guys' corners, and it's expensive to fly to Australia, and when you have to fly 2 extra cornermen there, that's pretty cost prohibitive. With the additional expenses of a camp, don't really want to go down that route too much. And I agree with you. I think that the Hall Whitaker fight probably deserves a fight of the night because I do like when two people really go at it. I don't want to leave this show without kind of making our final comments on the main event and just kind of let's rewind and take ourselves out of the moment for a bit and think when we look back on this, let's play a little forecasting. Let's play a little fortune teller. Mm-hmm. Do we look at this card and say this is the beginning of the Holly Holm? Is this the beginning of the Machida era?
It's tough to say. I mean, this will always be the night the upset happened. The Holm upset. No matter what happens. I mean, for Rosholt and Struve, Kelly Montgomery, those are going to be things of the past. People are always going to talk about the Holly Holm fight. Incredible performance. I mean, as far as is this the Holly Holm era? I mean, we don't really know, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, I still don't know what her ground game's like. Can anyone get her to the ground? Ronda Rousey couldn't. Does Ronda Rousey have a good game plan? We don't know. Did she try and get her to? I mean, it's tough to say. There's so many question marks going forward, and it'll be curious to see what the UFC does. I mean, I tend to think they will do the rematch, UFC 200. It seems like that is the most obvious thing from a marketing standpoint that they'll try and do. If I'm treating this like a sport, Rousey got dominated. I don't want to see the rematch. I would rather see a new challenger, whether that's Miesha Tate, whether that's Juliana Pena, whether that's someone else. That's what I would do if I'm treating this as a sport, but this is a business. It's an entertainment business. They're going to do the Rousey rematch. They're going to hype it up. They're going to do, embedded, media tour, you name it. They're going to do all these things, and it's just going to be a huge thing, but it's the same thing with the Velasquez and Verdum rematch. I don't want to see that. We're seeing it because, people want to see Kane, and, he apparently has some appeal, even though his numbers say otherwise as far as the pay-per-views go. But it's, I think that's the forecast going forward. It's going to be about the comeback and the rematch. Don't be surprised if the 2016, theme for next year, because, what was it this year?
Vengeance.
It's going to be, vengeance or the comeback or something. You got to tune in. You don't want to miss it. Everyone likes a good comeback story.
The revenge of the champions. John Jones. Holly Holm.
Sly Stallone being like, well, when I filmed Rocky, I really believed that this is a story that needed to be told. And then Q and Rousey, running in the snow or something. It's going to be something like that, something cheesy. So, don't be surprised.
Yes, we will look forward to the UFC's fantastic marketing campaigns in the future, as embarrassing and cringeworthy as they will be. This overall card, let's put a letter grade on it. It's A to D in your land, but in our land it's A to F. What are you going to put on it?
I mean, you got to give it like a B plus. I mean, I'd love to give it an A as far as the surprises that happened and the finishes and things like that. But you did have those boring fights, so I can't quite give it an A because thanks, Jared Rosholt, you ruined it for us.
You ruined it for everyone.
So, but no, it's no. All kidding aside, no, it's a B plus. But it will always be this will always be a card that will be remembered the same way that. Do you remember who else fought on that St. Pierre Serra card? Not really.
Hell no.
Yeah, I do remember. I remember that was Diego Sanchez's first loss in his career because Koscheck beat him on that same card.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the only other thing I remember. I couldn't tell you anyone else that fought in that card. But this is the card that we'll always remember Holly Holm won. So that's something in itself, and that has to be a B. But like I said, those snoozer fights, they can't be ignored here. We got to have some standards if we're doing this letter grade thing properly. Am I right?
I'm with you, man. You can't make the dean's list when you fail a class. Right. And unfortunately, it looked like Jared Rosholt and Danny Martinez and Richie Vass, you flunked it out for everybody. So I'll stick it on that solid B+. And really, it only rescued itself because of the absolute insanity of that main event. Like I said, I'm still kind of a little divided, James, whether this is really good for the sport or if this is bad for the sport. But either way, this is a night that makes me glad to be a fan of MMA because this is the type of shit that gets me hyped. And I was really hyped at the beginning of the show. And the more I think about it, the more that excitement isn't going away, and it's this kind of feeling that really makes me happy that I follow the sport as much as I do.
And aren't you glad you watched the card? I mean, imagine someone who had to be at a wedding tonight and you find out the Holly Holm one. That actually happened with me with Anderson and Chris Weidman, the first fight.
No!
Yeah, it did. I was at my high school reunion. I had no way of watching it, and literally I was avoiding spoilers. And I'm going to tell the story because he knows that this is what happened. But I avoided Twitter because I was like, I don't want to find out any results. And I went on Facebook like a dummy. And who wrote something as a status update?
Harlan Bardsey.
It was Adam Martin.
Oh, Adam, even worse. My arch nemesis, Adam Martin. Yeah. How dare you, bro? I'm lucky you blocked me on Twitter.
Yeah, no, I thought you guys are cool.
Oh, we're good. I'm fucking around.
No. I was going to say, and he knows this because I was joking around, but it was my own fault for going on there. And all he wrote was, "Wow, I can't believe that just happened in the main event." And I was like, "Oh, great. Well, I obviously know why." So it didn't hold the same excitement, but yeah, thank God I got to watch this part of history. I've seen pretty much all the upsets live. I think I've rarely missed like any of sort of the big ones. So yeah, it was great to be a part of it. And for me, I mean, I got to sleep on this, but I'm still going to be in shock tomorrow. I'm still kind of just taking it all in.
Yeah, kind of continuing a streak of absolutely fantastic title fights with the UFC too. Talk about delivering in the major spots. Damn near, or I can't remember a single title fight that Joanna Jędrzejczyk's fight kind of was the last lackluster one, but. If you talk about that there was 2 title fights, but the big main spots in all these UFC cards have just been goddamn fantastic.
Well, and Dodson Johnson was kind of expected. It wasn't not to take anything away from Mighty Mouse, but he's one we got to point out too.
Damn you and your fucking knowing and remembering fights and your encyclopedic knowledge of what happens. Like, this is a real sport, goddammit, James Lynch.
No, you're right.
We've had just some really great success and like some really awesome things happen this year. Yeah. And it's a fantastic time to be an MMA fan. Probably the best time ever.
Yeah, as far as the unpredictability of the sport, it's definitely full force now. No one is safe. It's like they said, anyone can win a fight, and we saw that tonight. So I'm with you, man. It's great to. That's the best part of the sport is you're not going to get this in in NFL or hockey or anything like that. It's not going to happen because there's so much that goes into it. It's a team sport. This is individual. It's on the individual. So it'll be interesting to see how things go forward.
James Lynch says no one is safe. I think that's a fantastic way to close it out. That's the end of the show really for UFC 193. I'm still a little bit in shock, even though we've been talking about this for for an hour plus. I don't think I will come off this buzz until I get a good 8 hours of sleep in me. James Lynch, why don't you tell us where we can find you, where we can interact with you, and hear your wonderful, intelligent statements on MMA?
Awesome. Appreciate you having me on the show. First off, got to get you back on the Parting Shot. And speaking of the Parting Shot, every Sunday, noon, MMA Odds Breaker. Got to check it out. You can follow us on Twitter at Parting Shot MMA. But if you want to get a hold of me, at Lynch on Sports on Twitter. Always up for talking, not just MMA. Love talking some hockey. Love talking some politics. Whatever you want to talk about, I'm definitely down. And check out my YouTube channel. I've been doing a lot of interviews. We talked a bit about this off air. Doing the video interviews. YouTube.com/Lynch on Sports. Subscribe. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. Not just getting fighters from the UFC, but from all organizations. We're talking even the regional ones too. So you get a little bit of everything. And yeah, like I said, Andrew, really appreciate you having me on. Always a pleasure.
No, thank you, James Lynch. And really big shout out for the Elite XC poster I see in the background there. When I first, that's the most fantastic piece of MMA memorabilia maybe ever.
I can't zoom in this webcam here. Maybe we'll see if we can do this live here. But here,
is that the James Thompson fight?
Yeah, James.
Oh, good. Oh, of course it is.
Bobby Lawler autograph, Kimbo Slice autograph, James Thompson autograph, Scott Smith. Forget him. Phil Baroni, Gina Carano, all down there autographs. You can kind of see it a little bit.
This is the man you want covering your sport, ladies and gentlemen. Someone who has an Elite XC poster up.
Okay, let me tell you how I got this quickly as we
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
So I used to work at Fight Network, and Fight Network was moving their offices, and this was like before they kind of Fight Network has gone through a bunch of different phases. Like where they're at now, the studio and everything is completely different from when I was there. When I first started, they were run by this guy who spent all this money. Basically, what happened was they were moving offices to another location that they're not at now, but they were throwing out all this stuff, including this poster. So I grabbed it. I got it for free, and I was like, "This."
Oh yes.
I've also got a Fedor Randy one. You can kind of see here in the background.
Yes, of course.
And at the top there, Affliction poster signed by Randy and Fedor as well too. So a little MMA history lesson here for you folks. For those who don't know, Affliction was an organization that was crumbled by Josh Barnett. So look at the history.
The brilliant investment strategies of Donald Trump. Yeah. If you're gonna vote for Donald Trump to be president, you have to research the history of Affliction. That is a requirement.
T-shirts. People hate Reeboks. I mean, those shirts were awful.
Oh God.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely got to throw back to the history there.
Yeah, we let hashtag bring back Affliction. Jesus Christ. Thank you, James Lynch, for coming on the show. Fantastic as always. If you people out there don't know the Parting Shot podcast, James Lynch, Carlin Bardsley, probably my favorite MMA podcast, comes out. I always listen to it on Monday mornings. It usually comes out late Sunday, something like that. So kind of one of the first ones to hit the weekly airwaves there and give you a real quick reaction to the fights. Just a fantastic program, one that I personally enjoy a lot. Thank you, James Lynch, once again for coming on the show. Thank you, everyone who stuck with us to the end here and watched the entire program. I very much appreciate all my viewers. Hit me up on Twitter anytime. I'm at the Clown Kid on the old Twitter machine. Definitely tell people, share this link, subscribe to the YouTube channel Before the Bald Man Speaks. I'm Andrew Lawrence. Thanks for tuning in. As always, peace.